The wipers of the black Mercedes swept back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the freezing Chicago rain. Inside the car, the air was warm and smelled of expensive vanilla perfume. Jinwoo kept his hands perfectly still on the leather steering wheel. He stared at the red traffic light, watching the rain blur the glowing circle. Next to him, his fiancée, Claire, was talking. She had been talking for 20 minutes straight about wedding invitations and whether the paper should be eggshell white or cream. Jinwoo did not care. He just nodded when she paused to take a breath. He was good at pretending. He had to be. 4 years ago, he was a top surgeon at the best hospital in the city. Now, he spent his nights in a damp basement, pulling bullets out of mob bosses and drug dealers. "Jin, are you even listening to me?" Claire asked, her voice sharp. She crossed her arms. "I said the gold lettering is going to cost an extra 2,000. "Whatever you want, Claire," Jinwoo said softly. His voice was calm, but his jaw was tight. He stopped the car at the empty intersection. It was past midnight. The streets were black and slick with water. Thunder rolled somewhere far away. He just wanted to get to Claire's penthouse, drop her off, and go home to drink until he passed out. Then, a shadow stumbled out from the dark alley on the corner. Jinwoo narrowed his eyes. At first, he thought it was just a drunk, homeless person. But the way the figure moved was wrong. It was jerky, desperate. The street lamp flickered, casting a pale yellow light over the crosswalk. It was a woman. She was dragging her left leg, limping heavily into the middle of the street, right in front of his headlights. "Oh my God, what is that crazy bitch doing?" Claire gasped, pressing her hand against the glass. "Honk at her, Jin. She's blocking the road." Jinwoo did not honk. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. His heart slammed against his ribs. The woman in the rain turned her head toward the bright lights of the car. Her dark skin was pale and washed out, her hair plastered to her face in wet, heavy ropes. She was clutching her stomach with one hand. Dark, thick blood poured through her fingers, washing down her legs and staining the wet concrete. With her other hand, she was dragging 2 small children. Twins. They looked no older than 3, wearing oversized, soaked jackets. They were crying, their little faces twisted in absolute terror as they clung to their mother's sides. The woman swayed. Her knees gave out. She crashed hard onto the wet hood of Jinwoo's Mercedes. Her bloody hand slapped against the white paint, smearing a thick streak of red across the metal. She slowly raised her head, staring right through the windshield. Her eyes met his. It was Adesua. The woman who lied to the police. The woman who framed him for stealing hospital drugs. The woman who took away his medical license, destroyed his family's name, and left him to get swallowed by the criminal underworld. The only woman he had ever loved. And right now, she was bleeding to death on the hood of his car. Before we see what Jinwoo does next, please take a second to leave a like on this video. It really helps the algorithm push more dark, gritty stories like this straight to you. Also, let me know down in the comments, where are you watching from right now? Or rate this opening out of 10. But listen closely. If you don't hit that subscribe button for the timeless K-Love membership on Gumroad right now, Adesua is going to bleed out right here on the freezing Chicago asphalt. Her toddlers are going to be left completely alone in the cold rain while Jinwoo drives away. I am demonetized, so your support is the only thing keeping these characters alive. Don't be the reason she loses her last bit of hope. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. Go support the channel right now, or the blood is on your hands. Adesua's mouth opened, but no sound came out over the heavy drumming of the rain. She just stared at him, her eyes wide with shock and pain. Her bloody hand slid down the slick metal of his hood, leaving a horrible, thick trail of dark red. The 2 toddlers screamed, pulling at her wet shirt, trying to pull her back up. "Jesus fucking Christ," Claire shrieked. She grabbed Jinwoo's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his suit jacket. "Jin, she's bleeding. Call the police. Call 911 right now. She's getting blood all over the car." Jinwoo did not move. He did not reach for his phone. He sat frozen in the driver's seat, feeling the ghost of a knife twisting in his own gut. For 4 years, he had imagined what he would do if he ever saw Adesua again. He had imagined ruining her. He had dreamed of making her beg for mercy the way he had begged the medical board to listen to the truth. Now here she was. The universe had delivered her right to his bumper, broken and dying. Poetic justice. All he had to do was put the car in reverse, drive around her, and let the street take her life. "Jin," Claire yelled, shaking him hard. "Are you deaf? Call the fucking cops." "No," Jinwoo whispered. "What?" Claire stared at him like he had lost his mind. Jinwoo threw the car into park. "I said no." He unbuckled his seatbelt, pushed the door open, and stepped out into the freezing downpour. The cold rain hit his face like icy needles. He walked around to the front of the car. The smell of copper and wet pavement hit his nose instantly. It was the smell of a heavy bleed, a fatal bleed if it wasn't stopped fast. Adesua was slipping off the hood. Her legs could not hold her anymore. She crumpled onto the wet asphalt, pulling the two screaming toddlers down with her. They hovered over her, crying out, "Mama, mama up." Jinwoo stood over her, the rain soaking his expensive suit. He looked down at the woman who had ruined his life. She was shivering violently. Her dark eyes fluttered up to meet his. She recognized him. Even through the pain, even through the haze of blood loss, she knew exactly who was standing above her. "Jin," she choked out. Blood bubbled at the corner of her lips. She coughed, a wet, rattling sound. "Jin, please." "Please what?" Jinwoo asked. His voice was cold, empty of any warmth. He did not bend down to help her. He kept his hands stuffed in his pockets. "Please save you? Why the fuck should I do that, Adesua?" Adesua let out a ragged sob. She pressed her hand harder against the right side of her stomach. The gunshot wound was low, probably hitting an artery based on the amount of dark blood pooling around her in the puddle. "Not me," she gasped. She weakly pushed one of the crying toddlers toward his leg. The little boy had curly hair plastered to his forehead and tears streaming down his face. "Them, please take them." Jinwoo stared at the kids. They were identical, a boy and a girl. They had her dark, beautiful skin, but their facial features made Jinwoo's breath catch in his throat. The shape of their eyes, the line of their jaws. His heart slammed into a brick wall inside his chest. He did the math in his head. 4 years since she framed him and vanished. These kids were 3 years old. "Who did this to you?" Jinwoo demanded, his voice dropping into a dangerous, low growl. He found us," Adesua whispered, her eyes rolling to the back of her head. "He's coming. Jin, please." Before Jinwoo could ask who the hell she was talking about, the passenger door of the Mercedes flew open. Claire stepped out, holding an umbrella over her head. She looked at the bloody scene on the ground with absolute disgust. "Jinwoo, what the hell are you doing talking to this junkie?" Claire shouted over the rain. "I called 911. They are on their way. Let's get back in the car before she gives us some kind of disease." Jinwoo snapped his head toward Claire. A dark, ugly rage flared in his chest. "You called the cops." "Yes, of course I did," Claire yelled back. "Look at this mess, she's bleeding everywhere." "Cancel it," Jinwoo ordered. He finally took his hands out of his pockets and crouched down next to Adesua. The water soaked through his pants, soaking his knees in freezing rain and warm blood. "Are you crazy?" Claire took a step back. "I'm not canceling shit, the police are coming." Jinwoo grabbed Adesua's shoulder. Her skin was freezing cold. She was going into shock. He did not have 10 minutes for an ambulance. He did not have 5. And if the cops showed up, they would ask questions. They would see his face, run his name, and the mob boss he worked for would have him killed by morning for bringing heat to their operation. He looked at the 2 kids. They were shivering, holding onto their mother's bloody shirt. Jinwoo swore under his breath. "Fuck." He scooped Adesua into his arms. She was so light, too light. She let out a weak groan of pain as he lifted her. Her blood immediately soaked through his white dress shirt, sticking to his skin. "Open the back door," Jinwoo barked at Claire as he walked toward the car. Claire stood perfectly still, her mouth hanging open. "You are not putting that bleeding street trash in my car. Do you know how much this leather costs?" "I bought the damn car, Claire. Open the fucking door," Jinwoo roared. The raw violence in his voice made Claire flinch. She had never heard him yell. She thought he was a quiet, polite businessman. She did not know the man who cut off limbs in basement rooms. Trembling, she reached out and pulled the back door open. Jinwoo carefully placed Adesua onto the pristine white leather seats. The blood immediately smeared across the expensive material, soaking into the cushions. He turned back around and grabbed the two screaming toddlers by their hands, practically dragging them to the car and tossing them into the back seat next to their dying mother. "Sit there and do not move," he told the kids. They were too scared to disobey, instantly scrambling onto the floorboards and pressing themselves against Adesua's legs. Jinwoo slammed the back door shut. He turned to Claire. She was staring at him like he was a monster. "Give me your phone," he demanded, holding his bloody hand out. Why?" Claire backed up. "Give me the damn phone, Alina," he said, messing up her name in his anger. Claire handed it over, her hands shaking. Jinwoo looked at the screen, saw the active 911 call, and hit end. He tossed the phone onto the wet pavement. "Hey, that's a $1,000 phone," she screamed. "Get your purse out of the front seat," Jinwoo said, his voice deadly quiet now. The storm raged around them, but he was completely focused. "Why?" Claire asked, panic rising in her chest. "Because you are not getting back in this car," Jinwoo stated. He walked around to the driver's side and pulled the door open. "Excuse me," Claire shrieked, dropping her umbrella. "You're leaving me here, in the rain, in this neighborhood. Are you out of your fucking mind, Jin? We're getting married next month." Jinwoo paused. He looked at her over the roof of the car. The rain washed the blood off his hands and onto the door handle. "No, we're not." He slid into the driver's seat and slammed the door. He locked it instantly so she couldn't try to get in. Through the wet window, he saw Claire screaming, beating her fists against the glass, yelling at him to let her in. Jinwoo ignored her. He slammed his foot on the gas pedal. The heavy Mercedes fishtailed on the wet street, the tires screeching loudly before finding traction. He sped away, leaving his fiancée standing alone in the dark, freezing rain. He glanced at the rearview mirror. Adesua was slumped sideways. Her eyes were closed. Her chest was barely moving. The two toddlers were crying silently, their little hands covered in her blood. "Don't you dare die on me," Jinwoo growled to the empty car. He gripped the steering wheel, pushing the car past 80 miles an hour down the slick city streets. "You don't get the easy way out, Adesua. You owe me a life, and I am going to make you pay for it." The neon lights of the city blurred into wet streaks of red and blue against the windshield as Jinwoo pushed the Mercedes faster. The engine roared, a deep and expensive sound that was completely out of place in the rundown streets he was heading toward. Rain hammered against the metal roof. It sounded like a million tiny hammers trying to break in. In the back seat, the little girl let out a high, piercing wail. Mama, wake up," she screamed, shaking Adesua's limp arm. Her small hands were covered in her mother's thick, dark blood. The little boy was not screaming. He was completely silent, his eyes wide and frozen as he stared at the red puddle growing on the white leather seat. Jinwoo glanced at the rearview mirror. His eyes locked onto the boy's face in the passing streetlights. It was like looking at a ghost. The boy had Jinwoo's exact jawline. He had the same dark, straight eyebrows. The realization hit Jinwoo again, heavy and hard, stealing the air right out of his lungs. "Damn it," Jinwoo hissed through his teeth. "Hold on back there, I said hold on." He yanked the steering wheel hard to the left, running a red light. A massive delivery truck slammed on its brakes, blasting its horn as the Mercedes barely missed its front bumper. Jinwoo did not even flinch. His eyes stayed glued to the dark road ahead. He was driving deep into the south side of Chicago, far away from the shiny glass buildings and expensive restaurants he used to go to with Claire. Down here, the streetlights were broken. The buildings were empty brick shells. He looked in the mirror again. Adesua's head was thrown back against the window. Her eyes were closed. Her skin looked gray in the shadows. "Don't you close your eyes, Adesua," Jinwoo yelled over the crying little girl. "Do you hear me? If you die in my car, I will never forgive you. Open your damn eyes." Adesua did not move. Jinwoo's heart pounded against his ribs. He hit the gas harder. The tires screeched as he took a sharp right turn down a narrow, trash-filled alley. At the very end of the alley was a massive, rusted garage door attached to an old, abandoned meatpacking warehouse. Jinwoo reached up and pressed a small black button hidden on his sun visor. The rusted metal door slowly began to roll upward, grinding and squealing in the cold night air. Jinwoo did not even wait for it to open all the way. He drove the Mercedes right under the bottom edge, the roof of the car barely scraping the metal. As soon as the car was inside, he pressed the button again. The door slammed shut behind them, cutting off the sound of the freezing rain and the howling wind. They were inside. It was dark, cold, and smelled like bleach, old concrete, and dust. Jinwoo slammed the car into park and killed the engine. Fluorescent lights buzzed loudly above them, flickering on one by one. They cast a harsh, bright white light over everything. This was his world now. A hidden basement clinic built for men who could not walk into a real hospital with bullet holes in them. He ripped his seatbelt off and threw his door open. He ran around to the back and yanked the door wide. The smell of fresh blood hit him instantly, thick and metallic. "Get out," Jinwoo ordered the kids. His voice was sharp and hard. The little girl just cried harder, shrinking back against the door. The little boy finally moved. He climbed over his mother's legs, his shoes leaving bloody footprints on the floorboards, and slid out of the car. He reached up and grabbed his sister's hand, pulling her out with him. They stood on the cold concrete floor, shivering in their soaked jackets, staring up at Jinwoo with pure terror. Jinwoo ignored them. He leaned into the back seat and grabbed Adesua. He slid his arms under her knees and behind her back, pulling her out of the car. She was completely dead weight. Her head rolled back over his arm. "Come on," Jinwoo grunted, kicking the car door shut with his foot. He looked down at the two kids. "Follow me right now. Do not stop walking." He carried Adesua fast, his black dress shoes clicking loudly on the concrete. He walked past stacks of wooden crates and pushed open a heavy steel door at the back of the warehouse. Inside was his operating room. It was completely spotless. The walls were lined with metal cabinets filled with stolen hospital supplies, antibiotics, and surgical tools. In the center of the room sat a cold, stainless steel operating table under a massive ring of bright surgical lights. Jinwoo walked straight to the table and laid Adesua down. Her bloody clothes stuck to the metal. The two kids ran into the room right behind him. The little girl tried to run to the table, crying for her mother. "Stop," Jinwoo barked. He turned around and pointed a bloody finger at an old, cracked leather couch in the corner of the room. "Sit on that couch, both of you, right now." The kids froze. The boy swallowed hard, grabbed his sister's hand tighter, and led her to the couch. They climbed up onto the leather and sat perfectly still, their legs dangling over the edge. They just watched him with wide, wet eyes. Jinwoo turned his back to them. He had a job to do. He was no longer the angry ex-boyfriend. He was the surgeon. His mind snapped into a cold, sharp focus. He grabbed a pair of heavy trauma scissors from a metal tray. He leaned over Adesua and started cutting. He sliced right up the middle of her wet shirt, pulling the fabric apart to expose her stomach. He cut her bra and tossed it to the floor. Then he cut the waistband of her jeans, pulling the thick denim down to get a clear look at the damage. It was a mess. The bullet had entered the right side of her lower stomach, just above her hip bone. The hole was small, jagged, and oozing dark red blood. But the real problem was underneath. Jinwoo pressed his gloved fingers around the wound. The skin was tight and swollen. "Internal bleeding," Jinwoo muttered to himself. He leaned over and checked her back. "No exit wound. The bullet is still inside." He grabbed a penlight from his shirt pocket and shined it into her eyes. Her pupils were sluggish. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. She was slipping into hemorrhagic shock. If he did not get blood into her and stop the leak in the next 5 minutes, she was going to die right here on his metal table. Jinwoo spun around and ran to a large glass-front refrigerator in the corner. It was stocked full of blood bags he bought from a black market dealer every month. He grabbed 4 bags of O-negative blood and ran back to the table. He ripped open a sterile IV kit with his teeth, tossing the plastic wrapper onto the floor. He grabbed Adesua's left arm. Her veins were flat from the blood loss. He slapped the inside of her elbow hard, trying to get a vein to pop up. "Come on, you stubborn bitch," he hissed. He slapped her arm again. "Show me a vein, do not do this to me." A tiny blue line appeared under her cold skin. Jinwoo did not hesitate. He pushed the thick needle right into the vein. A small flash of blood popped into the plastic tube. He taped the needle down tight and hooked up the first bag of blood, opening the line so the red liquid rushed into her body. 1, he counted out loud. He moved to her other arm, found another vein, and pushed a second IV line in. He hooked up the second bag of blood. He needed to put her to sleep before he cut her open. He drew up a syringe full of propofol and pushed it into her IV line. "You are going to sleep now," Jinwoo said, even though she could not hear him. He glared down at her face. The bright lights washed out her beautiful features. "And when you wake up, you are going to tell me why the hell you have 2 kids that look exactly like me." He walked over to the scrub sink. He turned the water on high and scrubbed his hands and arms with strong orange soap. He washed the blood off his skin, watching it swirl down the silver drain. He dried his hands, snapped on a fresh pair of tight blue surgical gloves, and tied a blue paper mask over his mouth and nose. He walked back to the table. The heart monitor he had quickly hooked to her chest was beeping in a fast, panicked rhythm. Beep, 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 beep. Her heart was working too hard to pump what little blood she had left. He picked up a silver scalpel. The metal felt cold and heavy in his hand. It was a familiar weight. It was the only thing in his life that made sense anymore. "Okay," Jinwoo whispered. "Let's see what you did to yourself." He pressed the sharp blade to her skin, right next to the bullet hole. He made a long, deep cut down her stomach. The skin split open smoothly. Bright red blood instantly welled up, spilling over the sides of the cut and running down her sides onto the metal table. Jinwoo grabbed a suction tube and pushed it into the wound, sucking away the blood so he could see. He used metal retractors to pull the muscle and fat apart. It was a nightmare inside. The bullet had ripped through the edge of her large intestine and smashed right into a medium-sized artery near her hip. The artery was pulsing, shooting a small stream of blood into her belly with every heartbeat. "Got you," Jinwoo said. He moved his hands faster than most people could track. He grabbed a pair of silver clamps and dove his fingers right into the bloody mess. He found the torn artery and clamped it shut hard. The bleeding stopped instantly. Jinwoo let out a long, shaky breath. His shoulders dropped slightly. He had stopped the main leak, but he still had to fix the intestine and find the bullet. He heard a small noise behind him. It sounded like a sniffle. He glanced over his shoulder. The little boy had climbed off the leather couch. He was standing a few feet away from the operating table, holding his dirty, wet jacket tight around his small body. He was staring right at the massive pool of blood on the floor under the table. "I told you to sit on the couch," Jinwoo said, his voice muffled by his blue mask. The little boy slowly looked up at Jinwoo. His bottom lip was trembling. "Is my mama going to die?" he asked. His voice was small, cracked, and full of tears. Jinwoo stared at the boy. He saw his own eyes looking back at him. It made his chest ache in a way he had not felt in 4 long years. He looked back down at Adesua. Her chest was rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm now that the blood was flowing back into her system. "No," Jinwoo said flatly. He grabbed a needle and some heavy surgical thread. "She is not going to die. I am not going to let her off that easy." He turned his attention completely back to the open wound. He had to be careful now. The intestine was delicate. If he did not stitch it perfectly, the contents would leak into her body, and she would die of a massive infection in 3 days. He leaned in close, his mask almost touching her stomach, and started to sew the torn tissue together. For the next 2 hours, the only sounds in the basement clinic were the steady beep of the heart monitor, the suction machine slurping up blood, and the soft, terrified cries of the little girl on the couch. Jinwoo worked like a machine. He did not stop to rest his back. He did not stop to wipe the sweat out of his eyes. He dug deep into the muscle near her spine until his metal forceps hit something hard. Clink. He smiled grimly behind his mask. He clamped the forceps down and pulled hard. A silver, squashed piece of lead popped out of the bloody hole. Jinwoo dropped it into a metal bowl on the tray beside him. It rattled loudly against the steel. A 9mm bullet. Standard issue for half the street gangs and mob enforcers in Chicago. Someone really wanted her dead. He finished stitching her up, closing the long cut on her stomach with neat, perfectly spaced black stitches. He washed the dried blood off her skin with a wet sponge and taped a large white bandage over her stomach. It was over. He had saved her life. Jinwoo stepped back from the table. He was exhausted. His back screamed in pain. His white dress shirt was completely ruined, soaked in sweat and her blood. He ripped his blue mask off and threw it in the trash. He pulled his bloody gloves off and tossed them next. He walked over to the couch. The little boy had climbed back up next to his sister. They were both huddled together, shaking from the cold air in the clinic. Jinwoo stared at them. They were so small. He walked over to a metal cabinet, pulled out 2 large, clean white hospital blankets, and walked back to the couch. He threw the blankets over the kids. "Wrap up," he ordered. "Don't touch anything in this room." He did not wait for them to answer. He turned around and walked over to the operating table. He pulled up a rolling metal stool and sat down right next to Adesuwa's head. He crossed his arms over his chest and stared at her face. She was still pale, but the awful gray color was gone. She was breathing on her own. Jinwoo reached out and grabbed her cold hand. He squeezed her fingers tight. "You owe me a life now, Adesuwa," he whispered to the empty room. "And I am going to collect every single second of it." The harsh buzzing of the overhead fluorescent lights filled the quiet basement. Jinwoo rubbed his tired eyes with the back of his clean hand. He felt the heavy ache in his bones, the kind of deep exhaustion that only came after hours of high-stress surgery. He looked away from Adesuwa's sleeping face and turned his chair toward the old leather couch. The 2 toddlers were still huddled together under the white hospital blankets. They were staring at him. Their wide, dark eyes tracked his every move. They looked like 2 small, terrified animals trapped in a cage. Jinwoo sighed heavily. He stood up from the rolling stool and walked over to a metal storage closet. He pulled open the doors and dug through a pile of donated clothes he kept for his criminal patients who needed to burn their bloody gear. He found 2 oversized gray t-shirts. They were meant for grown men, but they would have to do. He walked back to the couch and dropped the shirts on the cushion next to the boy. "Take off your wet clothes," Jinwoo ordered, his voice low and tired. "You are going to get sick if you sit in freezing wet clothes." The little boy just stared at the gray shirts, then looked up at Jinwoo. He pulled the blanket tighter around his little sister. He did not say a word. He was trying to be brave, trying to protect her, even though he was shaking like a leaf. Jinwoo felt a strange, sharp pull in his chest. He kneeled down on the cold concrete floor so he was at eye level with the boy. Up close, the resemblance was even more painful. It was like looking into a mirror from 30 years ago. "I am not going to hurt you," Jinwoo said. He kept his voice as steady and calm as possible. "But your mother's blood is all over your jackets. It is sticky, it smells bad, and it is going to make you cold. Take them off. Put these big shirts on. They will fit like dresses, but they are dry." The little boy swallowed hard. He looked over at the operating table where his mother lay perfectly still. "Is the bad man going to find us here?" Jinwoo's eyes narrowed. "What bad man?" "The man with the loud gun," the boy whispered. His bottom lip trembled. "He yelled at Mama. He made a loud noise, and then Mama fell down and there was red water everywhere." A cold, dark anger settled deep into Jinwoo's stomach. Whoever shot Adesuwa had done it right in front of these kids. He reached out slowly, making sure the boy could see his hands, and gently grabbed the zipper of the boy's soaked jacket. The boy flinched, but he did not pull away. "No," Jinwoo said firmly. He pulled the zipper down. "The bad man is not going to find you here. Nobody knows about this place. You are safe." He helped the boy out of the wet, bloody jacket and pulled the massive gray t-shirt over his head. The boy practically swam in it, the hem dragging all the way down to his dirty sneakers. Jinwoo did the same for the little girl. She whimpered a little when he pulled her jacket off, crying softly for her mother, but she let him put the dry shirt on her. Jinwoo gathered their wet, ruined clothes and threw them into a red biohazard bin in the corner. He walked over to his small kitchen area, opened the mini fridge, and pulled out 2 bottles of water and a couple of plain granola bars. He brought them back to the couch. "Eat," he commanded, setting the food on the cushion. "And drink the water slowly. Don't make yourself sick." The kids were starving. They tore into the wrappers instantly, stuffing the dry granola into their mouths with both hands. Jinwoo watched them for a long moment. His mind was racing. He had a million questions, and the only person who could answer them was currently unconscious on his metal table. He walked over to a sink, washed his face with cold water, and grabbed a clean black t-shirt from his locker to replace his ruined dress shirt. He pulled it over his head, the dark fabric clinging to his tired muscles. He pulled a chair right up next to Adesuwa's table and sat down to wait. 2 hours passed. The storm outside raged on, the thunder shaking the heavy metal doors of the warehouse. Inside, the only sounds were the slow, rhythmic beeps of the heart monitor and the soft breathing of the twins, who had finally fallen asleep curled up together on the couch. Suddenly, Adesuwa's fingers twitched. Jinwoo sat forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He watched her chest rise and fall a little faster. She let out a dry, raspy groan. Her head rolled from side to side on the metal table. The drugs were wearing off. The pain was waking her up. Her dark eyes slowly fluttered open. She blinked against the harsh, bright surgical lights shining down on her. She looked confused, completely lost in a haze of drugs and pain. She tried to sit up. A sharp, breathless scream tore from her throat as her stomach muscles pulled against the fresh stitches. She fell back down, panting hard, her hands flying to her heavily bandaged stomach. "Do not move," Jinwoo said. His voice was cold, completely empty of any sympathy. It echoed loudly in the quiet room. Adesuwa turned her head sharply. She winced in pain as she looked at him sitting in the shadows next to her table. Her eyes went wide. The memories of the street, the rain, and the blood came rushing back to her. Panic instantly flooded her face. "My babies," she gasped, trying to push herself up again, completely ignoring the horrible pain. "Jin, where are they? Where are my babies?" Jinwoo stood up and pushed her firmly by her shoulders flat onto the table. "I said, do not move. If you rip those internal stitches, you will bleed out inside your own stomach, and I am not putting you back to sleep to fix it." "Where are they?" she sobbed, wild terror in her eyes. She grabbed his arm, her weak fingers digging into his skin. Jinwoo pointed a finger over his shoulder toward the corner of the room. "They are asleep on the couch. They are fine. I gave them dry clothes and food. They are safe." Adesuwa looked past him. She saw the 2 small lumps huddled under the white blankets on the leather couch. A massive, shuddering breath left her lungs. The fight drained out of her body, leaving her completely exhausted. She closed her eyes, and hot tears began to leak out of the corners, rolling down her dark cheeks and dripping onto the metal table. "Thank you," she choked out. "God, Jin, thank you. You saved them." "I did not do it for you," Jinwoo said flatly. He pulled his chair closer and sat back down. He crossed his arms over his chest, staring down at her. "I did not save you out of the kindness of my heart, Adesuwa. I saved you because you owe me answers, and you are not going to die before you give them to me." Adesuwa swallowed hard. Her throat was incredibly dry. She opened her eyes and looked at him. He looked so different from the man she used to know. The Jinwoo she loved 4 years ago wore tailored suits, had neat hair, and always smiled softly at her. This man had dark circles under his cold eyes. He wore a plain black shirt that showed off new, dark tattoos on his forearms. He looked dangerous. He looked like the kind of men she had been running from. "Water," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, my mouth is like sand." Jinwoo stared at her for a few seconds. He grabbed a plastic cup from a tray, filled it with cold water from the sink, and grabbed a small plastic straw. He brought it over, slipped his hand under her neck, and lifted her head just an inch off the table. He put the straw to her dry lips. She drank greedily, sucking the water down as fast as she could. Slow down, Jinwoo warned, pulling the cup away. You will throw it right back up. He lowered her head back down and set the cup aside. He sat back in his chair, leaning in close so his face was just inches from hers. The air between them felt thick and heavy. Who shot you? Jinwoo demanded. There was no hesitation. He did not ask how she felt. He went straight to the business. Adesua looked away, staring up at the bright lights. His name is Marcus. He works for the Ramirez family. Jinwoo's jaw tightened. The Ramirez family was a heavy-hitting cartel that ran half the drug trade on the west side. They were vicious. They did not leave loose ends. If a Ramirez hitman put a bullet in her, they were going to come looking for the body. What the hell did you do to get a Ramirez hitman tracking you down in the middle of a rainstorm? Jinwoo asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I stole from them, Adesua said quietly. A fresh tear slid down her face. I took a bag of cash from a stash house. I had to. I needed the money to get out of the city. We were going to take a bus to Canada tonight, but he found us at the motel before we could leave. You stole cartel money, Jinwoo repeated, rubbing his face with his hands. A bitter, dark laugh escaped his lips. You really have a talent for ruining your own life, don't you? 4 years ago, you framed a top-tier surgeon for stealing hospital narcotics to save your own skin. Now you are stealing cartel cash. You just leave a trail of destruction wherever you go. Adesua squeezed her eyes shut. She bit her lower lip so hard it almost bled. I didn't have a choice, Jin, either time. Bullshit, Jinwoo suddenly yelled, slamming his hand down on the metal tray next to the table. Surgical tools rattled loudly against the steel. The noise made Adesua flinch hard. On the couch, the twins stirred but did not wake up. Jinwoo took a deep, shaky breath, forcing his anger back down into his chest. He could not afford to lose control. Not yet. You had a choice 4 years ago, Jinwoo hissed, leaning over her. His eyes burned with a furious, trapped heat. You went to the police. You sat in that little gray room and you looked the detective right in the eyes and you told him that I was the one stealing the fentanyl. You told them I was selling it. You took the evidence from your own locker and you planted it in mine. You looked at me in the courtroom, Adesua, and you lied under oath. You took my license. You took my family's honor. You forced me into this miserable basement, digging lead out of mobsters just to survive. Do not ever tell me you didn't have a choice. Adesua sobbed openly now. Her whole body shook, which pulled at her fresh wound, making her gasp in pain. She clutched her bandaged stomach, staring up at him with broken, guilty eyes. I am so sorry, she cried, her voice breaking into a million pieces. I am so sorry, Jin. I never wanted to hurt you. I loved you. Then why did you do it? Jinwoo demanded, his voice cracking with a pain he had tried to bury for years. Why did you destroy me? Adesua took a ragged breath. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, smearing a bit of dried blood on her cheek. She looked him right in the eyes, her expression completely ruined by grief. Because my brother owed them, she whispered, her voice shaking violently. My brother owed the Ramirez family $60,000. He lost it in a bad poker game. They told him they were going to kill him, and then they were going to kill me. Jinwoo stared at her, his face turning to stone. So you stole the drugs from the hospital to pay his debt? Yes, she nodded quickly, crying harder. I started stealing the fentanyl. I gave it to Marcus to clear the debt, but the hospital started noticing. The auditors came. They were going to do a massive sweep of the staff lockers. And you panicked. Jinwoo finished the story for her, his voice dripping with absolute disgust. You realized you were going to go to prison for 10 years, so you decided to throw me under the bus instead. Your own boyfriend, the man who was planning to marry you. No, Adesua cried out, reaching for his hand. He pulled it away instantly, standing up and taking a step back from the table. She dropped her hand back to her chest, her heart breaking all over again. It wasn't just panic, Jin, she begged, looking up at him desperately. Marcus found out the police were coming. He told me that if I went to jail, the debt would fall back on my brother and they would murder him. But then he told me something else. Jinwoo crossed his arms, staring down at her with a cold, unforgiving glare. What? Adesua took a deep breath. She looked over at the sleeping kids on the couch, then looked back at Jinwoo. "He told me that if I went to prison, they would make sure I miscarried," she whispered, the words tumbling out of her mouth like broken glass. "They told me they had guards on their payroll. They said if I took the fall, my babies would not survive the first week inside." The air in the room completely vanished. Jinwoo stopped breathing. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to echo louder and louder in his ears until it sounded like a roaring train. He stared at her, his mind trying to process the words she had just said. He slowly turned his head and looked at the sleeping little boy. He remembered the dark, straight eyebrows. He remembered the exact shape of the jawline. He did the math in his head for the 100th time since he saw them in the street. 4 years since she left, 3-year-old kids. Jinwoo slowly turned back to Adesua. His chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a heavy steel chain around his ribs and pulled it tight. "Adesua," Jinwoo said. His voice was completely hollow, completely empty. "Tell me the truth right now, or I swear to God I will walk out of this basement and never come back." Adesua choked on a sob. She closed her eyes, unable to hold his furious stare. "Are they mine?" Jinwoo demanded. The words ripped out of his throat, raw and violent. Adesua opened her eyes. They were completely flooded with tears. She gave one slow, painful nod. "Yes," she whispered into the cold air. "They are yours, Jin, Mateo and Maya. They are your children." Jinwoo did not speak. He could not. The words hung in the cold air of the basement like thick, poisonous smoke. Mateo and Maya, your children. He took a slow step backward, his heavy boots scraping loudly against the concrete floor. He bumped into a metal tray cart. He did not even turn around to look at it. He just stood there, staring at the woman on the operating table. His chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. "Mine," Jinwoo whispered. The word tasted strange in his mouth. He ran a shaking hand through his dark, messy hair. He looked over at the old leather couch. The 2 small bodies were still huddled under the white hospital blankets. His son, his daughter. They had been in the world for 3 years, walking, talking, breathing, and he had absolutely no idea. Adesua watched him with terrified eyes. She saw the storm brewing in his face. It was not just anger. It was a deep, violently broken grief. "Jin," she sobbed, trying to reach her hand out to him again. "Please, you have to understand." "Understand?" Jinwoo snapped. His voice was suddenly incredibly loud, bouncing off the concrete walls. He grabbed the metal cart next to him and shoved it hard. It crashed into the wall. Silver surgical tools flew everywhere, clattering loudly against the floor. Adesua cried out, pressing her hands against her bandaged stomach as she flinched from the loud noise. "You want me to understand?" Jinwoo yelled, stepping right up to the edge of the metal table. He leaned over her, his eyes wild and dark. "You stole my life, Adesua. You stole my career. You threw me to the wolves, and I survived it. I told myself every single day that you did it to save your worthless brother, and I learned to live with the pain. But this," he pointed a shaking finger toward the couch, "you stole my children from me." "I was protecting them," Adesua screamed back, her voice raw and tearing at her throat. "I was protecting you." "Don't you dare lie to me," Jinwoo roared. He slammed both of his hands down on the metal table, right next to her head. The whole table shook. "How does keeping my own kids a secret protect me?" Adesua closed her eyes. The tears kept falling, soaking into her hair. "Because if I told you the truth 4 years ago, you would have fought them. I knew you, Jin. You were so good. You were so brave. If I told you I was pregnant and the Ramirez cartel was threatening to kill the babies, you would have gone straight to the police. Or worse, you would have gone to the cartel yourself to try and buy my brother's debt." Jinwoo stared at her. His jaw was locked tight. "I would have found a way." "They would have killed you," Adesua cried out. She opened her eyes and looked up at him, her face completely twisted in pain. "They are monsters, Jin. They chop people up and put them in barrels. If you tried to fight them, you would be dead. And I would be dead. And Mateo and Maya would never have been born. I had to take the blame. I had to run away. It was the only way to make sure the kids got to live." "So you decided to play God," Jinwoo said. His voice dropped back down to a deadly, cold whisper. "You decided that my kids would grow up in cheap motels, running from hitmen instead of having a father." I did what I had to do, she whispered, turning her head away from him. I am a horrible person, I know that. Hate me all you want, but they are alive. Jinwoo backed away from the table. He felt like he was going to throw up. His stomach twisted into a hard, painful knot. 4 years of missed birthdays. 4 years of first steps, first words, sicknesses, and nightmares. She went through all of it alone, in the dark, constantly looking over her shoulder. And he spent those 4 years cutting bullets out of gang members, drinking himself to sleep, and trying to forget her face. A small sound broke the heavy silence in the room. Jinwoo turned his head. On the couch, the white blanket was moving. The loud crash of the metal cart had woken them up. The little boy, Mateo, slowly sat up. He rubbed his eyes with his small fists. The oversized gray t-shirt hung loosely off his narrow shoulders. He looked around the bright, terrifying room until his eyes landed on Jinwoo. Instantly, the boy froze. He remembered the yelling. He remembered the angry man standing over his mother. Mateo quickly reached down and shook the lump next to him. His little sister, Maya, woke up with a soft whine. Mateo pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her tightly to protect her. He glared at Jinwoo. It was a fierce, brave look that completely betrayed how scared he actually was. Jinwoo felt his heart crack perfectly in half. He turned away from Adesua and slowly walked across the concrete floor toward the couch. He made sure to keep his hands open and visible. He did not want to scare them more than he already had. When he reached the edge of the leather cushion, he slowly dropped down onto his knees. He was completely leveled with them now. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. Maya had Adesua's nose and soft lips, but she had his eyes. Mateo was a tiny, exact copy of him. Hey, Jinwoo said. He forced his voice to be as soft and gentle as possible. It was a tone he had not used in 4 years. It felt rusty in his throat. Mateo did not answer. He just pulled his sister tighter against his chest. Maya hid her face behind her brother's shoulder, peeking out at Jinwoo with wide, frightened eyes. I am sorry I yelled, Jinwoo said softly. He rested his hands on his knees, keeping his distance. I was very angry, but I am not angry at you. I will never be angry at you. Mateo blinked. You yelled at my mama. I know, Jinwoo said, nodding slowly. Your mama and I have a lot of things to talk about, grown-up things, but she is going to be okay. The bad hole in her tummy is closed up. She just needs to rest. Maya sniffled. She slowly lowered the blanket from her face. Mama sleep. Yes, Jinwoo answered, his chest aching at the sound of her tiny voice. She is sleeping so she can get better. You both need to sleep too. We want to go home, Mateo said. His little voice was stubborn, even though his chin was trembling. Jinwoo swallowed the hard lump in his throat. He looked at the dirty sneakers on their feet. He thought about the freezing rain outside, the Ramirez hitman looking for them, and the cheap, dirty motel room Adesua had mentioned. You cannot go back to that place, Jinwoo told them gently. It is not safe, but you do not have to be scared anymore. I promise you, nobody is ever going to hurt you again. Mateo tilted his head, studying Jinwoo's face. Are you a police? Jinwoo let out a short, hollow laugh. No, I am a doctor. He slowly reached his hand out. He did it carefully, giving the boy plenty of time to pull away. He hovered his hand just above Mateo's head. When the boy did not flinch, Jinwoo gently rested his palm on Mateo's dark, curly hair. The touch sent an electric shock straight through Jinwoo's entire body. The warmth of his son, the reality of it, it grounded him. It cleared away the useless, blinding anger and replaced it with something far more dangerous. Purpose. You are going to stay here with me, Jinwoo said, looking deeply into his son's eyes. I am going to take care of you, both of you. He gently patted Maya's head next, offering her a small, sad smile. She stared at him for a second, then gave a tiny nod before burying her face back into her brother's shoulder. Jinwoo stood up. He pulled the white hospital blankets tightly around them, tucking the edges under their feet so the cold basement air would not reach them. Go back to sleep, he ordered softly. I will be right here when you wake up. He waited until they laid back down against the leather cushions and closed their heavy eyes. He watched their small chests rise and fall in a steady rhythm. Only when he was sure they were asleep did he turn around and walk back to the operating table. Adesuwa was watching him. Her tears had stopped, leaving her dark skin tight and dry. Jinwoo pulled the rolling stool over and sat down beside her. He leaned close to her ear. He did not yell this time. His voice was completely calm, smooth, and utterly terrifying. "Here is what is going to happen now," Jinwoo whispered. "You are not going to Canada. You are not running away. You are never taking my children out of my sight again." Adesuwa swallowed hard. "Jin, you do not understand the danger. The Ramirez cartel." "I don't care about the Ramirez cartel," Jinwoo cut her off sharply. "Do you think I have just been sitting in this basement crying for 4 years? Do you think I am just a sad little doctor anymore?" Adesuwa stared at him, truly looking at him. She saw the dark tattoos creeping up his forearms. She saw the cold, dead look in his eyes that only belonged to men who had taken lives. She felt a sudden, freezing chill run down her spine. "Who do you work for, Jin?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I work for the Pak family," Jinwoo stated flatly. Adesuwa choked on her own breath. The Pak family was the largest, most violent Korean syndicate in the Midwest. They controlled the ports, the illegal casinos, and the underground weapon trade. They were the only criminal organization in the city that the Ramirez cartel actively avoided. "I saved the lives of their top men," Jinwoo continued, his voice perfectly level. "I cut bullets out of their bosses. They owe me. And if I tell them that a Ramirez hitman came after my family, the streets of Chicago will be painted red by morning." "Jin, no," Adesuwa begged, trying to sit up. The pain forced her right back down. "You cannot start a war. People will die." "I told you," Jinwoo said, leaning so close his nose almost touched her cheek. "I don't care. I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let another man point a gun at my children. They are mine now." He pulled away from her and stood up. He looked down at her with absolute authority. "You owe me your life," he told her coldly. "And you are going to spend the rest of it making up for the 4 years you stole from me. You are trapped in my world now, Adesuwa. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we are moving." The harsh buzzing of the overhead fluorescent lights seemed even louder when the first dull gray rays of morning tried to push through the dirty glass blocks near the ceiling. The heavy storm had finally passed, leaving behind a freezing, quiet chill in the basement. Jinwoo had not closed his eyes for a single second. He sat on the metal rolling stool, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped tightly together. His knuckles were white. He was staring at the floor, but he was not looking at anything. His mind was a loud, chaotic mess of anger and planning. He slowly lifted his head and looked across the room. On the leather couch, the twins were still asleep under the white blankets. They looked so peaceful. It was a sharp, painful contrast to the bloody, terrifying world they had just been dragged into. Jinwoo reached into his pocket and pulled out a cheap, black burner phone. He flipped it open and stared at the glowing green screen. He had not called this number in almost 6 months. He only used it when someone in the Pak family was bleeding to death in the back of a van. But today, he was the one who needed a favor. He dialed a short string of numbers and pressed the call button. He lifted the phone to his ear and listened to it ring. 1, 2, 3, 4. "What?" A deep, rough voice answered on the other end. The man sounded like he had just woken up and was incredibly angry about it. "It is Jinwoo," he said, keeping his voice low so he would not wake the kids. There was a heavy pause on the line. Then, the sound of a lighter flicking open and a long pull of a cigarette. "Do you know what time it is, Doc? The boss is not awake. Nobody is bleeding. Why are you calling my phone at 6 in the morning?" "I need a car T," Jinwoo said flatly. "A clean one, not stolen, not hot. An SUV with dark windows. I also need a safe house outside the city limits. Somewhere the Ramirez boys do not go." T let out a harsh, barking laugh. The sound grated against Jinwoo's tired ears. "The Ramirez cartel? What the fuck did you do, Doc? Did you slice up one of their guys on your table?" "No," Jinwoo lied smoothly. "I have a personal problem. It's spilled over. My white Mercedes is sitting in the garage right now covered in blood, and my fiancée was left standing on the street with her phone dialing 911. I cannot go back to my apartment. I need to disappear for a few weeks. T sighed loudly, blowing smoke into the phone receiver. You know how much a clean, safe house costs, right? The Pack family is not a charity. You cut bullets out of us, we pay you cash. That is the deal. We are not your personal babysitters. Jinwoo's jaw tightened. Tell the boss I will work for free for the next 12 months. Any gunshot, any knife wound, any broken bone. I will supply my own drugs and my own tools. You will not pay me a single dime for a whole year. Just give me the keys to a house and a car in the next 30 minutes. The line went dead silent. A year of free medical care from a top-tier surgeon was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to a crime syndicate. It meant they could go to war on the streets and not lose their best men to cheap infections or blood loss. 30 minutes, T finally said. His voice was all business now. I will bring a black Tahoe to the back alley door. Be ready to move. If you bring Ramirez heat to my drop-off, I will put a bullet in your head myself. The line clicked and went dead. Jinwoo snapped the phone shut and put it back in his pocket. He stood up, his back popping loudly in the cold air. He had to get them moving. He walked over to the metal sink and ran the cold water. He splashed it on his face, trying to scrub away the heavy exhaustion pulling at his eyes. He dried his face with a rough paper towel and turned toward the operating table. Adesua was awake. She was lying perfectly still, her dark eyes tracking him across the room. Her skin still looked pale, but the awful gray color of death was gone. She looked terrified, just like she had 4 years ago when she stood in the courtroom and told the judge those horrible lies. Jinwoo walked over to the metal cabinet and pulled out a small orange plastic bottle. He popped the white cap off and shook 2 heavy white pills into the palm of his hand. He walked over to her table and held them out. Take these, he ordered. Adesua looked at the pills, then up at his cold face. What are they? Oxycodone, Jinwoo said. He grabbed the plastic cup of water from the tray and held it up. They are going to dull the pain, but they are not going to stop it. We are leaving in 25 minutes. You are going to have to stand up and walk to a car. Adesua's eyes went wide with panic. She shook her head slowly. Jin, I can't. You just cut me open. I can feel the stitches pulling when I just breathe. If I stand up, I will tear open. You will not tear open if you move slowly, Jinwoo told her. He did not care about her fear. He only cared about the facts. I used heavy thread on your muscle wall, but it is going to hurt like a bitch. Open your mouth. He did not give her a choice. He pushed the 2 white pills past her dry lips. She gagged slightly, but he held the cup of water to her mouth until she swallowed them down. She coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made her grab her bandaged stomach and let out a sharp cry of pain. Jinwoo watched her suffer with absolutely no expression on his face. He put the cup down. Listen to me very carefully, Jinwoo said, leaning his hands on the edge of the metal table. A man is coming here to pick us up. He is a killer. He works for the Pack family. When he gets here, you are going to keep your mouth completely shut. You do not look at him, you do not speak to him. If he asks you a question, I will answer it. Do you understand me? Adesua nodded, fresh tears welling up in her eyes. Where are we going? Away from the city, Jinwoo replied, turning his back to her. That is all you need to know. Do not ask me again. He walked over to a large black duffel bag sitting in the corner of the room. He unzipped it and started throwing boxes of gauze, tape, antibiotics, and surgical tools inside. He grabbed 3 bags of saline and 2 bags of extra blood from the fridge and stuffed them in the side pockets. He needed to be ready to treat her if she ripped a stitch during the car ride. While he packed, he heard the soft rustle of blankets behind him. Mateo was awake. The little boy was sitting up on the couch, rubbing his eyes. He looked over at the operating table and saw his mother awake. Mama, Mateo cried out, his voice cracking. He scrambled off the leather couch, his bare feet hitting the cold concrete. He ran across the room as fast as his little legs could carry him, the oversized gray t-shirt dragging on the floor. Mateo, stop. Jinwoo barked, dropping the medical supplies and stepping in front of the boy. Mateo slammed into Jinwoo's legs. The boy looked up, his dark eyes full of angry tears. He started hitting Jinwoo's knees with his small fists. "Move! I want my mama. Let me see her." Jinwoo looked down at the boy. The tiny fists hitting his legs did not hurt at all, but they felt like heavy blows to his chest. This was his son, his blood, and the boy looked at him like he was a monster standing in the way of his mother. Jinwoo slowly knelt down on the cold floor, catching Mateo's small wrists in his hands. He did not squeeze hard, just enough to stop the hitting. "Look at me, Mateo," Jinwoo said firmly. Mateo stopped fighting, but he glared at Jinwoo, his chest heaving with small, shaky breaths. "Your mama has a very bad OE on her tummy," Jinwoo explained, keeping his voice low and steady. "If you jump on her or bump into the table, you will hurt her very badly. You can talk to her, but you cannot touch her tummy. Do you promise me?" Mateo sniffled, wiping his running nose on the sleeve of the big gray shirt. He looked past Jinwoo's shoulder at Adesuwa. She was smiling at him through her tears. "I promise," Mateo whispered. Jinwoo let go of the boy's wrists and stepped aside. Mateo walked slowly up to the edge of the metal table. He stood on his tiptoes to see her face. "Hi, baby," Adesuwa choked out, reaching her trembling hand down to stroke his curly hair. "Mama is okay, don't cry. Mama is right here." Jinwoo turned away. He could not watch them. It made the anger boil up in his throat all over again. They had this bond, this deep connection built over 3 years of surviving together, and he was completely locked out of it. He was just the scary man who fixed the bullet hole. He walked back to the couch. Maya was sitting up now, pulling the white blanket tight around her shoulders. She looked at him with wide, scared eyes. "We are leaving now," Jinwoo told her. He picked up their tiny sneakers from the floor. They were still damp from the freezing rain last night. He swore under his breath. He could not put wet shoes on them in this cold weather. He walked over to his locker, pulled out 2 pairs of thick black wool socks and walked back. He knelt in front of Maya. "Give me your feet," he said softly. She hesitated, then slowly stuck her small, cold feet out from under the blanket. Jinwoo pulled the massive black socks over her feet and pulled them all the way up to her little knees. It looked ridiculous, but it would keep her warm. He did the same for Mateo, calling the boy over and sliding the thick socks onto his feet. Suddenly, a loud, heavy grinding noise echoed through the warehouse. Jinwoo snapped his head toward the front of the building. The large, rusted metal garage door was rolling up. "He is here," Jinwoo announced. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He reached around to the back of his waistband and felt the cold, hard steel of his 9 pistol tucked against his spine. He made sure his black shirt covered it completely. He walked over to the operating table. He pulled the white hospital blanket off the bottom half of the table and wrapped it tightly around Adesuwa's waist and legs. She was only wearing her underwear and the large bandage on her stomach. Her bloody clothes were in the trash. "Put your arms around my neck," Jinwoo ordered, leaning over her. Adesuwa shook her head. "I can walk. You said I have to walk." "You are going to walk from the door to the car," Jinwoo corrected her roughly. "I am not letting you bleed all over my floor right now. Grab my neck." She slowly reached her arms up and wrapped them around his shoulders. Jinwoo slid one arm under her knees and the other behind her back. He braced himself and lifted her up. Adesuwa let out a horrible, muffled scream. She buried her face into his neck, biting down hard on his black shirt to stop herself from crying out loud. Her whole body went completely rigid with pain. The fresh stitches in her stomach pulled tight against her raw muscle. "Breathe," Jinwoo told her, his voice devoid of pity. "Just breathe." He looked down at Mateo and Maya. "Grab the black bag. Mateo, hold your sister's hand. Follow me and do not let go of her." Mateo grabbed the heavy strap of the medical duffel bag and dragged it across the floor with one hand, holding Maya's hand tight with the other. They followed closely behind Jinwoo's heavy footsteps. Jinwoo pushed through the steel door of the clinic and walked into the main warehouse. The large metal garage door was fully open now. The cold morning air rushed inside, hitting them like a wall of ice. Parked in the middle of the dark alley was a massive, pitch-black Chevy Tahoe. The engine was running, a deep, powerful hum that vibrated in the concrete. Standing next to the driver's door was a tall, incredibly thin Korean man. He was wearing a sharp black suit with no tie. He was smoking a cigarette, blowing thick clouds of white smoke into the freezing air. T watched Jinwoo walk toward the car, carrying a half-naked black woman wrapped in a blanket, followed by two small children wearing oversized shirts and giant socks. T took the cigarette out of his mouth and flicked it onto the wet ground. He stared at the bizarre scene with absolute disgust. "What the hell is this, Jin?" T demanded, his raspy voice echoing in the alley. He pointed a long, bony finger at Adesua. "You told me you had a personal problem. You didn't tell me you were running a shelter for street trash. The Pak family does not provide taxi services for junkies and their brats." Jinwoo stopped walking. He was 10 feet away from the Tahoe, his eyes locked onto T's face. The air between them turned deadly and completely silent. Mateo stopped dragging the bag. He could feel the sudden, terrifying danger rolling off Jinwoo's body. Jinwoo slowly lowered Adesua's feet to the ground. She whimpered in pain, swaying heavily, but Jinwoo kept his arm tightly wrapped around her waist to keep her standing. With his free hand, Jinwoo reached behind his back. In one smooth, lightning-fast motion, he pulled the 9 pistol from his waistband and pointed it directly at T's chest. T froze. His hand twitched toward his own jacket, but he was too slow. Jinwoo already had his finger tight on the trigger. "Do not move your hand, T," Jinwoo said. His voice was no longer flat. It was a deep, demonic growl that sent shivers down Adesua's spine. "If you move your hand, I will put a hollow point through your lung, and I will not be the one who sews it up." T slowly raised both of his hands in the air, a nervous, tight smile creeping onto his face. "Hey, take it easy, Doc. We are on the same side. I just asked a question." "And I am giving you the answer." Jinwoo stepped forward, keeping the gun perfectly leveled. "She is not trash. She is my woman. And those 2 kids behind me are my blood. They belong to me. If you ever look at them wrong, or if you ever use that tone of voice in front of them again, I will cut your hands off while you are fully awake. Do we understand each other?" T swallowed hard. He looked at the cold, dead eyes of the surgeon. He had seen Jinwoo pull bullets out of screaming men without blinking, but he had never seen him look like this. He looked like a boss. "Yeah, Doc," T said quietly, stepping back and pulling the back door of the Tahoe open. "We understand each other. Get in." The black leather seats of the Chevy Tahoe were freezing cold. Jinwoo carefully slid Adesua across the middle row. She kept her eyes squeezed tight, biting her lips so hard a small drop of blood appeared. She let out a low, shaking whimper as her back touched the cold seat. Jinwoo did not say anything to comfort her. He pulled the hospital blanket tightly around her shoulders and tucked it under her legs. He pointed to the 3rd row of seats in the very back of the SUV. "Climb in," he told the twins. Mateo held his sister's hand and pulled her up into the massive truck. They crawled over the folded seat and huddled together in the very back, pulling their own white blankets up to their chins. They looked incredibly small in the giant, dark car. Jinwoo tossed the heavy medical bag onto the floorboards. He climbed in and sat in the middle row, lifting Adesua's head and resting it gently on his lap. He slammed the heavy car door shut. The loud noise made Maya jump in the back seat. T was already in the driver's seat. He looked at Jinwoo through the rearview mirror. His eyes were hard and angry, but he did not say a word. He put the car in drive and hit the gas. The Tahoe pulled out of the dirty alley and onto the wet, gray streets of Chicago. The heater inside the car roared to life, blasting hot, dry air through the vents. It smelled like stale cigarette smoke and cheap pine air freshener. Jinwoo rested his hand on his knee, his finger tapping a slow rhythm next to the black pistol resting on his thigh. He wanted T to see the gun. He wanted to make sure the enforcer remembered exactly who was in charge right now. They drove in complete silence for a long time. The city slowly faded away outside the dark tinted windows. The tall glass buildings turned into rundown brick factories, and then the factories turned into empty, flat fields covered in dead, yellow grass. The rain from the night before was starting to turn into a freezing drizzle. Small pieces of ice hit the windshield with sharp, clicking sounds. Jinwoo looked down at his lap. Adesua had passed out. The strong white pills had finally pulled her under. Her chest rose and fell in a shallow, careful rhythm. Her skin was far too hot. He pressed the back of his hand against her forehead. She was burning up. "Damn it," Jinwoo whispered. A fever meant her body was fighting hard, and with a torn intestine, infection was the absolute worst thing that could happen. If she got a bad infection out here in the middle of nowhere, she would die, and no amount of stolen hospital supplies would save her. He felt a pair of eyes on him. He looked up and glanced at the rearview mirror. Mateo was not sleeping. The little boy was sitting up straight in the back, staring right at Jinwoo over the edge of the seat. Jinwoo turned his head slightly so he could look right at his son. He kept his face completely soft. He did not want to look scary anymore. "Are you warm enough?" Jinwoo asked quietly, making sure his voice did not carry over the loud, rushing sound of the car heater. Mateo gave a tiny nod. He looked down at his mother's sleeping face on Jinwoo's lap, then looked back up. "Is Mama dead?" The question felt like a knife, dragging across Jinwoo's ribs. "No," Jinwoo answered quickly. "She is just sleeping. The medicine makes her very tired. It helps her body fix the bad spot on her tummy." Mateo thought about that for a second. His dark, straight eyebrows pulled together in a deep frown. It was exactly the same face Jinwoo made when he was trying to figure out a difficult problem. "Are you going to fix her?" "Yes," Jinwoo promised, and he meant it. He would rip the world apart to keep her breathing, if only so he could yell at her some more when she woke up. "I am going to fix her, and I am going to keep the bad men away." Mateo seemed to accept this. He slowly sank back down into his seat, pulling his sister closer to him, and closed his eyes. An hour later, the Tahoe turned off the paved highway and onto a rough, dirt road. The car bounced and shook over deep, frozen potholes. Thick, bare trees lined both sides of the road, looking like dark, ugly skeletons against the gray winter sky. The car slowed down and pulled into a long driveway hidden behind a wall of dead bushes. At the end of the driveway sat a small, dark brown cabin. It looked completely abandoned. The porch roof was sagging, and the front windows were covered in thick layers of dust and dirt. There were no other houses around for miles. It was totally isolated. T put the car in park and killed the engine. The sudden silence in the car was heavy. "This is it," T said, turning around in his seat to look at Jinwoo. "Water comes from a well pump out back. Power is hooked up to a quiet generator in the shed. The tank is full. Nobody knows this place exists except the boss and me." T reached into his suit jacket. Jinwoo immediately tightened his grip on his gun. T saw the movement and stopped. He slowly pulled out a single silver key on a plain metal ring and tossed it over the seat. It landed on Jinwoo's chest. "Thanks," Jinwoo said coldly. He grabbed the key and stuffed it into his pocket. T let out a rough breath. "I did my part, Doc. The boss expects you to hold up your end of the deal. 12 months, free work." "I always pay my debts," Jinwoo replied. He looked out the window at the freezing, icy rain falling on the dead grass. Then he looked back at T. "But you are not done yet. I need supplies." T narrowed his eyes. "I am not your grocery boy, Jin." "You are today," Jinwoo stated, his voice completely flat. "Look at my kids, T. They are wearing my old t-shirts and adult socks. My woman is naked under a blanket. I need winter coats. I need real pants, shirts, underwear, and boots for a 3-year-old boy and girl. I need sweatpants and a warm jacket for her. And I need food. Bread, milk, peanut butter, bottled water, soup. Real food, not gas station garbage." "Are you out of your mind?" T snapped. "I am an enforcer for the Pack family. I shoot people. I do not go shopping for toddlers." Jinwoo leaned forward, bringing his face closer to the front seat. The cold, dead look returned to his eyes. "Then you better learn fast. You are going to drive to the nearest town. You are going to buy exactly what I told you. And you are going to drop it on that dirty front porch in exactly 3 hours. If you don't, I will call the boss and tell him you refuse to help me secure my family. We will see how much he cares about your pride when he loses his best trauma surgeon." T stared at him. The muscle in T's jaw jumped up and down. He wanted to pull his own gun. He wanted to shoot Jinwoo right in the face, but he knew he couldn't. Jinwoo was too valuable, and right now, Jinwoo was acting crazy enough to shoot back. 3 hours, T finally growled. "I will leave the bags on the porch, but do not ever ask me to do this shit again." "Just get it done," Jinwoo said. He opened his door and stepped out into the freezing wind. The icy rain hit his face and neck, making him shiver instantly. He opened the back door and pulled the medical bag out, tossing it onto the wet grass. He reached in and gently pulled Adesua into his arms. She groaned loudly, her body tense and stiff, but she did not wake up. "Get out," Jinwoo told the kids. "Run straight to the front porch. Stand under the roof so you don't get wet." Mateo and Maya scrambled out of the car. Their thick black socks instantly soaked up the freezing water from the puddles on the ground. They ran as fast as they could to the wooden porch, huddling together against the front door. Jinwoo carried Adesua to the porch. He kicked the medical bag out of the way, balanced her heavy weight on his left knee, and jammed the silver key into the old lock. He twisted it hard. The lock clicked, and he pushed the door open with his shoulder. He walked inside. It was freezing cold, colder than the air outside. The cabin smelled like old wood, dust, and mice. The living room had a dirty brown couch and a small wood-burning stove in the corner. "Come inside and close the door," Jinwoo ordered the kids. Mateo pulled his sister inside and used both hands to push the heavy front door shut until it clicked. Jinwoo carried Adesua down a short, dark hallway and kicked open the first door he saw. It was a bedroom. There was a simple, full-sized bed covered in a thin, dusty quilt. He did not care about the dust. He laid her down gently on the mattress. She curled up on her side, pulling her knees toward her chest to protect her stomach. "Okay," Jinwoo breathed out, rolling his shoulders to get rid of the deep ache. "We are safe." He left her sleeping and walked back out to the living room. The kids were standing exactly where he had left them, holding hands, shivering violently in the freezing room. Jinwoo felt a massive wave of guilt wash over him. He had to fix this fast. He walked over to a small metal box on the wall and flipped the main power breaker. A second later, the lights flickered on. A loud hum started up outside as the generator kicked in. He found the thermostat on the wall and pushed the slider all the way up to 80 degrees. The old vents near the floor immediately started blowing warm, dusty air into the room. "Go stand by the vent," Jinwoo told the twins, pointing to the metal grate on the floor. Mateo and Maya walked over and stood right over the vent. The hot air blew up their oversized gray shirts, making them look like little balloons. Maya finally let out a tiny giggle as the warm air hit her freezing legs. Mateo smiled a little bit, his shoulders dropping as he finally started to relax. Jinwoo watched them for a moment. He felt a strange, tight feeling in his throat. This was his family. It was completely broken, built on lies and blood, but it was his. He went into the small kitchen and dug through the dusty cabinets. He found a plastic cup, washed it out in the sink with cold water, and filled it. He brought it back to the living room along with the last 2 granola bars from his clinic. "Eat these," Jinwoo said, handing them to Mateo. "A man is bringing real food soon. This is just for now." Mateo took the bars. "Thank you," he whispered. Jinwoo nodded. He turned around and walked back into the bedroom. He needed to check Adesua's wound. The car ride was rough, and he was terrified she had ripped her internal stitches. He closed the bedroom door behind him so the kids would not see. He walked over to the bed and sat down on the edge. Adesua was sweating heavily now. Her dark curls were plastered to her forehead. Jinwoo slowly pulled the white hospital blanket down, exposing her stomach. The large white bandage was still there, but there was a fresh, bright red spot of blood blooming right in the center of it. "Shit," Jinwoo cursed under his breath. He ran back to the living room, grabbed his black medical bag, and rushed back to the bedroom. He ripped open a sterile pack of scissors and carefully cut the bloody bandage off her skin. He let out a long breath of relief. The black stitches holding her skin together were perfectly intact. The bleeding was just from a small surface tear caused by her moving around in the car. It was nothing serious. He cleaned the fresh blood away with a wet wipe, applied a thick layer of antibacterial ointment, and taped a fresh, clean bandage over her stomach. Then he pulled a syringe and a small glass vial of strong antibiotics from his bag. He filled the needle, tapped the air bubbles out, and injected the medicine straight into the muscle of her upper arm. She flinched, letting out a soft cry, but stayed asleep. "You are going to be fine," Jinwoo whispered to her, pulling the dusty quilt up over her shoulders to keep her warm. He sat in the quiet room, listening to the wind howl outside the dirty windows. He had done it. He had saved her life, he had claimed his kids, and he had escaped the city. But he knew this was only the beginning. The Ramirez cartel would not just give up. They lost a bag of cash, and they lost their target. They would search every motel and every hospital in the state. And if they found out that a mob doctor for the Pack family took her, it would start a massive gang war that would flood the streets with bodies. An hour later, Jinwoo heard a soft groan from the bed. He looked over. Adesuwa's eyes were open. She was staring at the cracked ceiling, her breathing fast and panicked. She quickly turned her head, looking around the strange, dusty room until her eyes locked onto Jinwoo sitting in the corner. "Where are we?" she asked. Her voice was weak and raspy. "A safe house," Jinwoo answered, his voice cold and hard. "Far away from Chicago, the cartel cannot find you here." Adesuwa tried to sit up, but the pain stopped her instantly. She fell back against the pillows, clutching her stomach. "Where are Mateo and Maya? Jin, where are they?" "They are in the living room eating," Jinwoo said. He stood up and walked over to the bed, looking down at her. "They are safe. They are warm. Stop panicking." Adesuwa closed her eyes and let out a long, shaking breath. "Thank God." "Don't thank God," Jinwoo snapped angrily. "God didn't save you last night, I did." Adesuwa opened her eyes and looked at him. The anger in his face was back. The brief moment of peace they had in the car was completely gone. Now that they were safe, the reality of what she had done to him 4 years ago hung heavily in the room. "Jin, I know you hate me," she whispered, tears filling her eyes again. "I know you want to hurt me for what I did, but please do not take it out on the kids. They don't know anything. They just want their mother." Jinwoo leaned closer to her face. His eyes were dark and completely unforgiving. "I am never going to hurt my children," Jinwoo said slowly, making sure she heard every single word. "I am going to give them everything. I am going to teach them, feed them, and protect them. But you need to understand your place in this house, Adesuwa." She swallowed hard, staring up at him with pure fear. "What do you mean?" "I mean you do not get to make the rules anymore," Jinwoo stated. "You lied to me. You stole my life. You hid my own flesh and blood from me for 3 years. You ruined me. So now you belong to me. You will do exactly what I tell you to do. You will not try to run away. You will not call anyone. You will sit in this house and let me take care of my family." "And if I say no?" she challenged softly, a tiny spark of her old stubborn fire showing in her eyes. "What if I take them and leave when you are not looking?" Jinwoo let out a dark, cruel laugh. It had absolutely no humor in it. "You have no money," Jinwoo reminded her. "You have a bullet hole in your stomach that will rip open if you walk too fast. And there is a cartel hitman looking to put a second bullet in your head. You cannot leave, Adesuwa. You need me. And I am never letting you take them away from me again."